Okay, I hit record, and I am. This is a JP joint. Um, we're doing joints with JP,
Mm-hmm.
and we are going to change up our format, which I'm actually very excited about because you're high in election, and I don't think I'm high in election. I'm just a nerd.
Oh,
I'm high learner. Does that work? We're
okay.
talking about our
I
strengths.
don't care. Follow your dreams.
Thank you. So we're changing it. That's why I like working with you, man. So we're changing up our format, and instead of talking about author life stuff because that's frustrating, we're going to talk about books that we've learned from and are learning from.
Mm-hmm.
And each time we do one of these, one of us is going to bring a book and present it to the other one, ideally a
Mm-hmm.
book the other one hasn't read.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. I'm bringing the book this time. Have you ever
Yeah,
read Good to
absolutely
Great
not.
by Jim Collins? Never read Good to
No.
Great? Do you
Nope.
have any knowledge of this book?
I literally looked it up 5 minutes before this.
Okay.
I also do not remember what I just read.
Let me give you a couple phrases and you can tell me if they stand out to you. The flywheel. Turn your flywheel.
Absolutely not. Nope.
Um,
Nothing.
level 5 leader.
I'm
No,
gonna hold back my opinions until later.
the right seat on the bus. Get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Any of that ring a bell?
Okay, that one kind of does, but
Okay. So this is a weird, and I gotta say, I will say this is a weird book to bring to a writing conversation.
yeah.
I'm bringing it because the reason that this book is so I this book was written in 2001. It is old.
Mm-hmm.
And for a
Ancient
while,
text.
ancient text. For a while it was like the standard leadership book that
Okay.
anybody that was, especially in the nonprofit world, we were obsessed with leadership books. We were like, because it was like, oh, we don't have enough money to actually do anything, so we have to learn all of the leadership books. This one really resonated with me, and I actually found a lot of success in practicing what it said. Um, it helped me understand what it means to be a leader. And so in the last year, maybe 2 year and a half, when I've been trying to understand why isn't my fiction business working? What am I doing wrong? Why do I feel like I'm flailing in all directions? This book was, I went back to this book and I was like, I need to apply the concepts of leadership from this book to my own business, which I'm not sure why I didn't do in the first place. And it makes a lot of sense. So to me, so I'm excited to like talk through you with it. That's why I'm bringing this
Okay.
book because
Okay.
I think regardless, I know there's people that disagree with me. I think the market is a little bit in chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of uncertainty. I think that there's a lot of people much smarter than me saying, and I agree with them, saying that the write fast, publish, repeat style, run the right ads, obsess over also bots, obsess over the pay per click ratio, that is, if not already dead, on its way to disappearing. And that
Mm-hmm.
like building a sustainable career that way is probably over. So so we're all kind of looking for like, how do we create this author business? And
Right.
this book is kind of building business 101. Is that a good enough intro?
I think so.
Did I excite you about Good to Great?
I still have no idea if you like this book or hate this book.
Oh, I love this. This is my Bible.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is my Bible.
I
I
was
love
like,
this.
I don't know, but I will hold back.
I have a love-hate relationship with this book because I do think that the stuff in it that we're going to talk about is really, really good, and I think it's really smart. I think it is close at times, feels close to impossible to accomplish.
Hmm.
Um, not because it like requires resources I don't have or anything like that. It's not like back when people would be like, "Oh, it's pay to click, it's pay to play, so you just got to like invest X amount of money. If you invest X amount of money, you'll get like twofold return." I was like, "Well, I don't
Yeah.
have X amount of money, so screw you guys." But this is something you can start doing by yourself, but it's also like the hardest thing in the world to do. All right, that's enough preface. Let's talk about it. Um,
Yeah.
Okay, so this book's published in 2001 by Jim Collins. Jim Collins is a professor of leadership in Colorado. And this book is actually a scholarly study, which makes it dry as toast to read. It is tough to read. What he does is he finds 10 different markets,
Mm-hmm.
and he takes companies that became over a 15-year period. I think it's 15 years. I might have the time period wrong, but it's 15-year period. He looks at companies that became world renowned in that market, and then companies that just did okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then he studies all of those companies to find what the ones that had in common did really well, that the ones that just did okay did not do. And he looks at all these different markets for that. And so um what he comes out with is like, hey, there are these 7 things that great companies do that like good companies don't do. And he's like, his definition of a great company is a company that is going to rise to the top of its market and is going to uh, um, leave a sustainable legacy. They can stop being great and die, because like it's funny, a lot of the companies that he talks about in this book that he was studying in the 90s are now gone, because like he'll
Yeah.
talk about at the end of the book, like, yeah, when you stop doing it, everything falls apart. So, and he actually
Mm-hmm.
has a book, now that I think about it, he has a book that he wrote after this called How the Mighty Fail. And he talks about what great companies did like fall apart. But anyway,
Mm.
so that's the idea. It's called Why Some Companies Make the Leap and Others Don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so here's his, I'm going to show you a picture.
Ooh,
Here is
there's
his,
pictures too?
oh my God. Oh, there are so many charts and graphs. You've read
Oh,
academic research. You know how academic research works.
oh,
There's like a
absolutely.
thousand
It's
charts and
so,
graphs.
yeah, it's so dry. You need pictures.
You have pictures. So this is his theory in concept, and we're going to talk about each of the pieces. But across the bottom, for those who can't see who are just listening, there are these things companies do. There's level 5 leadership. There's first who, then what. There's confront the brutal facts. There's the hedgehog concept. There's the culture of discipline, and there's technology accelerators. Under those, there's 3 things: disciplined people, disciplined thought, disciplined action. And then there's like a graph line above them that shows like breakthrough, like it's like flat line, and then it goes like skyrocket to the moon. It says that like when you're level 5 leadership, first who, then what, and confront the brutal facts, you're in the build-up phase, which is like the straight line. And then it becomes, when you hit the hedgehog concept, you start to break through. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's a big circle around the whole thing that says the flywheel. So this is his like, this is how you need to build your company.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, in an author business sense, if you're thinking about like, what do I want my business to look like? What do I want my writing to look like? How do I do this long term? Collins would say, and I would say, like, this is how you need to think about what's happening. You need to like lay it out in this order. So I'm going to start breaking these before there's not, I mean, you don't know what any of this is yet, so it's not real helpful to be
Absolutely
like, what
not.
do you think? So, but I just want to give you the full picture that like, this isn't just a, like, you need these 6, 7 components. This is like, there's an order to them, and
Mm-hmm.
they actually they don't necessarily work out of order. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have level 5 leadership, you can't really move forward into first who, then what. It's not helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. And there's looking at this and just trying to interpret it from my basic thought. I really like seeing that disciplined people leads into disciplined thought, but there is like a flat line buildup and breakthrough, because I think that really how I see a lot of like author businesses go with the first few books is really trying to discipline the person. And that's kind of where you make or break it. Can you discipline yourself as a person to write and complete books and novels before getting into the thought and concept of like doing this as a full-time thing?
Yeah, and he's going to contrast the different types of businesses as we move through, and like how most businesses think they should work.
Hmm.
And for him, like his take on how people think most businesses should work is you should have an immediate spike that you then sustain as a flat line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he actually will say, as we go through, he'll talk about how like people look at technology first. They try to find some trick in the industry. If I master Amazon ads and I'm paid to play, I can sell my books and I will spike, and then I will have a career forever. And he talks about how like if you don't follow this pattern, you might get a spike and you might have a career, but your company's going to burn out, specifically like in a solopreneur, like an entrepreneur, but just me, solopreneur endeavor, you're going to burn out.
Hmm.
And as things progress, that spike is going to diminish. And because you don't understand your flywheel, you don't know how to renew it.
Yeah.
So, because it's not just, there's not just a formula that's like, if I do X, Y, and Z, I will make business. Like, that's
Yep.
not, he's like, that's not how you become great. You can do something good, but that's not how you become great. And
Yeah.
yeah, as we talk through, I will say that like as I was reading this week again for like the 15th to 20th time, I actually got a new copy because my old copy was such a disaster. I couldn't read it anymore because I'd like circled and like outlined like there's whole paragraphs. I was like, I can't even read that. So I went and got a new copy. But um I was thinking through like the great author careers that I know, that I've studied and read about, like Stephen King or Robert Patterson, or even back to like Hemingway, like the older ones, or um,
Do you mean
Brand.
James Patterson?
I did mean James Patterson. Well, I said Robert
Not,
Patterson, which is
not
the
the actor.
Twilight actor, James Patterson. Um, yeah, or the guy who writes Reacher, whose name I can never remember, like Harlan Coben, or like yeah, Nora Roberts. What I've read about their careers and like how it worked, even like Toni Morrison, they very much fit this. Like
Hmm.
I can't be like this is how it happened, but I can take what I know of these storied careers and be like, oh yeah, all of these components were in place. They had a breakthrough, and then they've just been turning their flywheel. Like Stephen
Yep.
King just turns his, that's all he's doing. So we'll get into it. All right. So let's actually get into helpful things and not me talking about what we're going to talk about. Um, so his first concept is called level 5 leadership. I'm going to see if I can rotate this photo. There we go. This is a picture of level 5 leadership. No, what happened? There we go.
Do you want to share it with me?
I am sharing it with you. I had to put the
Okay,
right
good.
picture up. Yeah. So the level 5 leader, for them, and I'm gonna talk to you about level 5 leader, and then I'd like your reflection on this. And please feel free to call it bullshit. The level 5
Okay, good.
leader, yeah, he says ego is for the company and not for yourself. And ambition is about the success of the endeavor and not about your personal success. He says level 5 leaders have a mirror window concept, which means when things go right, and this is just his observation of level 5 leaders, when things go right, they talk about things happening outside of themselves.
Hmm.
They're like, yeah, like my team did this thing right, or this thing happened in the market that was really good, or this thing occurred. And he said, when they talk, and so they're looking out a window when things go right. And he
Hmm.
says, when things go wrong, they look in a mirror
Hmm.
and they're like, what was my participation in
Hmm.
this not working? Um, and he talks about how that makes these people incredibly difficult to study. Because when you sit down with them and you're like, how were you successful? They're like, well, this happened and then this happened and this happened. And those things led to my success. And he's like, but when you ask them, like, well, what happened at this turn when things kind of fell apart? They're like, well, that was my fault. And he said when he was studying it, he was shocked because what people think of the leader, of like the best kind of leader, is actually what he calls a level 4 leader, which is the more charismatic visionary. and the like celebrity charismatic visionary who like charms the world into success. He's like, that's a level 4 leader. And they're good leaders. They can like catalyze commitment around themselves. They can get people to join them. They have a high professional standard. He's like, but they don't lead things to greatness. They don't create great things. Sometimes he's like, they stumble into greatness. He's like, sometimes they will steal someone else's greatness, but they don't. And all of the companies that he studied that were like great companies, there was this level 5 leader at the top. So
Mm-hmm.
his definition of a level 5 leader is intense professional will, that they work incredibly hard, and they are like, he says they're plow horses, not show horses. They're just showing up and doing the job.
Yeah.
And there's this will of like, nothing will stop us. And then that is mixed with deep personal humility. And he calls it the unexplainable paradox of somebody who is like, I have this deep professional will. I am disciplined. He talks about how level 5 leaders, they commonly work harder than everybody else around them, but they are also intensely humble in how they present themselves. And he says, this is the start. If you're going to build something great, you have to be this kind of leader, whether you're leading other people or just leading your own work. You have to be intensely humble, and you have to be an incredibly hard worker.
Yeah.
All right, thoughts, pushback,
I
rage.
think no, there well, one, I have a dislike for corporate, but I think that this is very applicable when it comes to some of the nuances between self-published author and traditionally published author, because what I see are all these different levels function well when you have a team that does the marketing for you. When you have a team like that, you can be in this level 1 highly capable individual who's just contributing to the work, just
Mhm.
writing the work and sending it off to someone else for the edits and whatever. And that doesn't make you less, but what that does is that keeps you at that level because that's your contribution level. You are contributing to a greater cog.
Mhm.
When you're self-published, there are a lot more steps to go through based off of this method, to look at how to continuously promote yourself and understand that, um, especially understand that promoting yourself doesn't mean that you are a super egotistical person,
Yeah.
that you are, you're just shouting at everyone to like, read my book, read my book, read my book. Like you are understanding that in order to be seen, you have to be heard, and in order to be heard, you have to say something, and it has to be a kind of a constant thing, especially in this day and age, and especially with the technology that we have. So I think that this is just a lot of mindset stuff, but I can really see how some of it fits in with understanding for self-pub and traditionally published.
Yeah, and it's funny to me. I've worked with a lot of authors. We've been doing this now for 3.5 years, and I'm way over 200 authors I've at least done single sessions with, if not coached, for long term. And it's like, a lot of times I'll coach somebody. I've never met them. They just email me and they're like, "Hey, can we do a session? I'm starting a book, or I'm doing this thing and I want you to," and I'll coach them. Like, we'll have a session together. I'm like, "Oh, that was great." And then either it'll be an episode that goes up, or I'll mention to somebody like, "Yeah, I coach this person," not knowing anything about them, because I intentionally I never look up anybody I'm coaching. Never. So, because I don't want to know. So, you know, their episode will go up and I'll get these emails. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you worked with that person. They're amazing." Without fail, when I work with somebody who is quote unquote amazing, has an incredible career, is writing great books, they are incredibly humble.
Mm-hmm.
They do not come off. There is no ego. There is no
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm the most amazing person in this session and you better be nice to me. There's none of that. They are the most humble. They know how to take feedback. They know how to take edits. They do not hold their work as some kind of like, precious gem that they're an amazing author at. And working with them, I would never have known that they
Yeah.
are who they are. And
Yeah.
there's a like, I definitely see this trend in authors that like, if you're going to build a successful career, you have to work really hard, trad
Hmm.
published or indie published, but you also have to be incredibly open to criticism and realistic about, you know, who you are and what you're bringing to the table. And there's a lot of like deep humility that has to happen, which, to be clear, like humility isn't self-deprecation. That's not what humility is. Humility isn't like talking about yourself that you're crap all the time. Humility is considering other people as better than yourself,
Yeah.
or at least equal to yourself. So like when you get a note from somebody, you're not like, well, they're stupid and I'm right. Right. Like
Yeah.
humility is like, we're on the same playing field and there's things I have to learn from you all the time. So anyway, yeah, I really find this to be true, that like
Yeah.
authors that have built successful careers are incredibly hard workers and very humble.
I
And
think too, like there's a bit of an interesting dichotomy when it comes to authors who have come from the corporate world who are now in this world. And there's a mix of, especially in the Western world, like almost an expectation of praise, maybe. And that's
yeah,
because in the corporate world, you have goals. Those goals get reviewed. You have conversations with people who talk about how well you did, and a lot of it is fanfare half the time. But that's a lot of what we've been ingrained to understand. And now we're in a situation where the person on the other side of the table isn't your employer. They're just
yeah,
another person, and they're just going to be as honest as they need to be. There's no middle ground for it. And to be humble in a situation like that and understand that the art that you're doing, which is the dichotomy part of it,
yeah,
that this is something that a lot of people take very personally. It's a lot of like what they feel as being parts of their soul on paper
yeah,
sometimes, and understanding that it's now a piece of paper with words on it. It may reflect aspects of your soul, but
yeah,
some people may be like, maybe if you just put a little Windex over here, maybe if you
yeah,
just, reshape this entirely for other people to understand and see clearly.
yeah. And I'll say it is a struggle for me because I get that. My first couple books, I felt like, look, I was astounded by my ability to do something because I didn't think I'd actually be able to do it. So I know I came off as really cocky. And
Hmm.
by the way, those first books failed. So, but there's like, I think that was part of it. Part of it was me. Like, I remember when I was publishing the first series, I really wanted people to know that my lead character was African American. And so I was like telling my cover artist, put a black person on the cover. And my cover artist was like, that's a bad idea. These aren't like, that's not the genre you're writing in. That's not, people aren't going to understand what you're doing. And I
Hmm.
was like, I'm smart. I'm right. You do it. And
Right.
there's a total lack of humility on my part.
Yeah.
And she was right. But I was so enchanted by my own art. I
Yep.
couldn't, I didn't have the humility. Definitely had the will. Like I worked really hard, but I didn't have the humility at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Number two.
Okay.
Number two in disciplined people. Collins in number two says first who, then what. And so he's like, and this goes for if you're building, he has an addendum to this book called Good to Great in the Social Sector, which is about like, what if you don't have a company? What if you're working on your own and you're just like pulling people in around you? If you're like building a network. He's like, first, you have to figure out, you have to get the right people around you. And
Hmm.
only after you have the right people around you can you figure out what it is you're doing.
Yep.
And he's like, most of us figure out what we're doing. We get a vision for what we're doing. I'm going to write these kinds of books in this genre and I'm going to make 1,000. And then we try to get people around us to help us. And
Hmm.
Collins is like, no, it's the opposite. And so he says, before you figure out what you're going to do, you need the right people around you. Celebrity leaders will do the opposite. A celebrity leader is like, I have this great idea, everybody come join me. He's like, it's not, he goes, the temptation that we have to avoid is a genius with 1,000 helpers. But that's like the kind of common knowledge is like, I'm a genius and I need people to help me get my genius into the world. Collins is like, no, no, no. It is a like group of people who are equally disciplined, working hard toward common goals.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, when you meet the right people, it's not just enough to get the right people on your team, you have to position them in the right way on your team. So he's like, get the right people and lean into them completely, and then make sure they're on the right seat on your quote unquote team. He's like, and if somebody's in the wrong seat, get them in the right seat. If they're the wrong, he's like, if they're the wrong people, get them off your bus. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, stop engaging with them. Because he talks about like your endeavor, your business you're building, your company, your publishing life is this bus that you're driving. He's like, and you have to want a negative person, the wrong person on your bus who doesn't match your ideals and who isn't in with who you are, will cause so much more damage than the right person on the bus. So you've got to like, you can't surround yourself with people that aren't on page with you. It doesn't mean you can't be their friends. Doesn't mean you can't like
Right.
them. But when it comes to your career, you can't like let them have influence over what you're doing, because they will, the negative impact they'll have on the next phase, which is the hedgehog concept, will cripple your work.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
thoughts?
I relate to this so much.
I knew you would.
I
I was
feel like
reading
this
it this week.
is,
I was like, JP's gonna like this one.
and I think that that's because
Well,
that's
like hate.
where, like, hate, that's, I think, where I am maybe
Mhm.
in that stage. I might be getting close to the end of it, and I think that's okay. Like, I don't know where I am on this whole entire thing, but I feel like that's probably the best place. And the reason I say that is when I started writing, I ended up lucky enough to find like Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon. I think you were there. Were you there? I don't remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you were.
I was
On the
there.
Rockabach? Yeah.
No, I wasn't at Rockabach.
No, you weren't at Rockabach.
I was
Christine
in the
was there though.
community, but I wasn't at
Yeah,
Rock.
you were in the community.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm trying to remember who was all there. But anyways, like that became a community really fast. And I started to understand and click with certain people there. And from that community, I've met you, I've met Chris Kane and A.B. Cohen. All of you I consider to be this part of this who. It's the people I go to for various reasons. You and I co-write
Mhm.
together Nerds because we wanted to really develop this sitcom voice. And we've grown, I feel like, together since then. And I've been added more into like the Dialogue Doctor coach section to
Mhm.
be more of that nonfiction and editing coach kind of person. And I feel like in terms of this stage of things, when you're looking for the right who, uh, I think I'm looking for those sorts of other people I can put on this similar or slightly above level and bring them in humbly as I
Mhm.
can and try to work with them and help both. It's like a two-way conversation. I mean, when you were describing this sounds like masterminds. It sounds like uh things along those lines where
Mhm.
you are meeting people at their level and you have something to contribute as much as you are have something to take from it.
Yeah, I think the mastermind concept tends to be around like we're going to learn something together, or at least that's what it's become in the author world. Is like there's
I
something
think
we're
so.
learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
But I do think the true version of a mastermind, the like historic version of a mastermind, that when everybody's like, "Oh, this was like the Rockefeller type mastermind that everybody
Hmm.
points to," it was a bunch of very successful people or people that were going to be very successful
Hmm.
in different industries camping once a month
Yeah.
and like just hanging out and talking together. And it's like, yeah, there's a need to build a network of people around you that have the same drive that you have. They don't
Yeah.
have to be in the same, like, you don't have to be writing the same thing. They don't have to be like oh, that person's writing romance and I'm writing urban fantasy, so we're not in this together. There needs to be but it's about, we want the same things. We have the same
Hmm.
desire. We're working, ideally we're all level 5 leaders.
Yeah.
And that's like, and we're working together to advance one another's careers. I That's why, like, we've talked about this a little bit, but that's actually why I, like, when you were like, hey, are you thinking about Vela? I was like, oh, JP's looking for something. I want more JP in my life, because you're like, oh, this
Oh,
is a person I want on my bus. Like, you were working really hard. I'd listened to you like talk about what you wanted for your career and like what you were trying. I was like, yeah, this is somebody I want around me. So this is the reason that I was like, yeah, let's write something together. Because it was like,
and
this
then we
is,
just became a bunch of nerds.
and now we're a bunch of nerds. Yeah. It's also why I asked you to be part of the dialogue doctor. So I was like, JP
Yeah.
is fantastic and I want more. It's like when I started the dialogue doctor, this concept is why I went to Laura and was like, hey, I want you to do this with me. Because
Hmm.
Laura is brilliant and an incredibly hard worker. And
Hmm.
she's not afraid to call me on my shit. And
Yeah.
I love that.
And that's
Laura,
good.
yeah, and you've been in our conversations, Laura will be like, Jeff, no. And like, I need that. I need people around me who are working with me toward a common goal, to like be like, hey, this is how I see the world. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I really, this is something for my fiction specifically. I've been trying to practice for the last couple of years, and I need to practice more and more. I need to get the right people in network. It does require, like, hey, you might have to do some projects together. Like, hey, you
Hmm.
might have to, like, you know, this doesn't naturally happen. It's not organic. It really
Yeah.
takes effort.
Yeah.
Um, and I know you felt this too. Um, when I first started writing fiction, there was a group I joined. I'm not going to say what it was called. It was trying to create this thing
Yeah.
in a beautiful way. Like, it was a really smart idea. It was really good, but it was a pay for group. You paid to be a part of it, and it just grouped you together kind of at random, and like, hey, who's
Hmm.
here? And my first 3 years, I stayed with that group for 2 years. My first 2 years as an author was really frustrating, because it wasn't that they weren't great people. They were great people. And I'm still friends. Like, it's 8 years later, I'm still friends with some of them. Like, some of them were
Yeah.
really great people. We had very different desires and drives as an author.
Yep.
Um, it was like I had them in the wrong seats. I thought that they were going to be my like cohort that I ran with, but I found myself like running alone.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
but it's not wrong. We didn't have the same drive. We didn't have the same desires. They wanted other things. I'd put them in the wrong seats in my career. Like, one of them specifically that I still hang out with all the time, like, well, I don't hang out with her all the time. We engage on social media still. She lives in a different country, but we engage on social media with each other still. She's a really great author. She just wanted different things. And I like hearing what she's doing and learning from her, but I didn't
Hmm.
need to give her influence over the decisions I was making as an author. And that was a mistake. So anyway, that's
Yeah.
kind of how I think about it. Um, yeah, I think if you're giving the wrong people, as in they don't have the same vision that you have, influence over what you're doing, um, it can really slow you down. It
Yeah.
can really hurt
And
your work.
this was why I was hesitant to join local critique groups for a long time, because I didn't feel like that had the same interests
Yeah.
as I did. And I think that's totally valid. And ultimately I ended up creating a sort of local community. But at the end of the day, they don't have the same vision that I do. And I already have people on the bus that represent the people I want to be
Mhm.
surrounded by. And so while I have room on the bus for this local group, I think what I originally had attempted to do was either to I'm just gonna keep using this weird bus analogy, move people around or whatever. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I just realized I have some space. It's just not where I thought everything was.
Yeah.
Um,
and it's hard because like I do this all the time. I'm like, I want to do this thing. Let me go find people to help me
Hmm.
do it. Collins is like, no, no, no. Find the people. And then once you have the people, be like, hey, let's do something together.
Yeah.
It's a weird mind flip, but that's like, he's like, get around the right people. And once you find those people, be like, hey, how can we work together? What can we do together? Let's figure out how this happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think that's what I ended up doing with the local group was the
Mhm.
opposite.
Yeah.
And
And
I
I
was
do it
like,
all the time.
oh, I have seen what has happened
Yeah.
now.
Look at what I
It's
did.
different.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts about this one?
No, this one makes sense to me.
Okay. The third and the fourth one. So we've moved through disciplined people. Now
Hmm.
we're going to disciplined thought. And these are the two that I think are the hardest to
Okay.
actually practice. So number three is confront the brutal facts.
Hmm.
So Collins says you have to refine your path. Once you have the right people around you and you're operating in that intense personal will and deep humility, you have to refine your path by confronting the facts of reality. You have to have the humility to say that you do not understand things. So you need to ask questions and be open to learning and seek insight rather than adopting your preferred narrative and vision. So he
Yep.
contrasts between leaders that are like, what's happening in the world and how do I understand it versus leaders who are like, guys, I have a story and I like this story. And this story is going to be my lens that I interpret everything through. He's like,
Hmm.
true, great organizations, great businesses, great entrepreneurs aren't afraid to look at the market and be like, I need to face the brutal facts of what are happening here.
Yeah.
Um, he says these people thrive in debate. They're not afraid to like hear things. So he has four principles for these people: lead with questions, not answers. Uh, embrace dialogue and debate, not coercion. He's like, these leaders never come to a problem with an answer or like to try to convince people of things. He's like, if you're trying to convince your network, your strong network of people that you are right, then you probably aren't confronting the brutal facts. He's like, you're probably
Hmm.
living by a narrative you like. Number three is you have to conduct autopsies and they have to be brutal and real. Why didn't that work how we wanted it to? Or
Yep.
even if it worked how we wanted it to, what was like, what happened that we didn't expect? What didn't go as well as we hoped? Like, what was going on? And the fourth one is you need red flag mechanisms.
Hmm.
And he says you have to have something as you start an endeavor that's like, this is how I know I'm in trouble. This is how I know things are going wrong. And ideally, this is how my network, people who really care about me, can say, stop, you're in
Yeah.
danger. Like
Yeah.
that's so he lumps this all up in what he calls the Stockdale principle. He talks about a Vietnam vet who was imprisoned in Vietnam and actually organized all of the prisoners to help survive this internment camp. Um, they weren't allowed to talk, so they like develop a system of like talking to each other through brooms that they have to sweep with every day.
Hmm.
So then the leader of the camp was this guy named Stockdale. And so he says these people who practice confronting the brutal facts, they have a deep faith that they will prevail in the end, no matter how hard it is.
Hmm.
So no matter what's happening, they believe that they will win.
Yeah.
And they are not afraid to confront the brutal facts of reality. That they may not be winning right now, that things may be hard, that they may have screwed up, that they may have messed up, that they may have actually made things harder for them. They're not afraid to like look at those and accept that responsibility.
Yeah.
All right. Thoughts on that mindset as an author?
So, so far I've seen this as a sort of timeline. Things blend together a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but I do see this as a timeline. Uh, and this portion, it seems like on the author trajectory, this would be things have already been created. You have a couple books out there, and this is the time where you're like, is the brand that I have been branding myself as correct? And
Yeah.
then also the stage in which you have to remind yourself that this is a continual education.
Hmm.
We are not stagnant people. And if you refuse to learn, then you are not, like, you will be stuck forever. Portion of it reminds me, like, this is where you need to keep learning, go to conferences, go to do all that. But it's really funny because in the past 2 days, that's how quick my brain works, I have questioned if my tagline is correct. And it's the tagline I use and have on everything,
Hmm.
because I don't know if it's correct anymore. And
Yeah.
I created that tagline when I had a couple of books out. It's writer of things dark, strange, and queer. I think some of it is still very correct, but I don't know if all of it is.
Yeah.
And I got that idea, and I love this book. It's Your Book, Your Brand by Dana Kay.
Hmm.
Um, and it basically talks about, like, look at the works that you've created, and at the time I know what I had created, and pick out what those themes are. I think that at the moment I'm a bit of a less dark writer. I still have dark themes with AB Cohen, but like, my own personal stuff is not dark.
I don't know that Mandrake Manor is dark. I've read it, and I
Oh,
wouldn't
it's
call it dark.
not.
Yeah.
It's not dark at all.
Yeah, and we'll get into Brand in a second because that's his
Yeah.
next thing. But yeah, I think you're totally right. I hadn't thought of this as a timeline, but I think you're totally right that, like, there is a stage you have to go through where you're learning to think in a disciplined way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one specifically, the what you were telling me and me trying to relate it back to author life, this is where you question um what you're working on.
Hmm.
Is it what you want to be working on? Is it something that you've been holding on to, but maybe you need to move on to the next thing?
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of what this stage sounds like, is like, you need to take a hard look at the stuff that you've done and determine whether or not that's the same direction you're still going, or if
Yeah.
those were the learning steps and now you have separate paths that you can
Separate
take.
paths. Yeah. And I think in my author career, I think that the enemy of this is churn.
Hmm.
So, like, for the first 6 years that I was a writer, I churned so hard. I never stopped to confront the brutal facts. And I think there's a style of publishing that encourages this. The write fast, publish, repeat is like, next book, next book,
Hmm.
next book, next book. And it never tells you stop and confront the brutal facts of what's going on.
Hmm.
Because if I had taken time, I would have written my first 2 books. I would have stopped and I would have just for a moment paused and thought, okay, what's working, what's not working, what's real, what's not real, where am I finding success, where am I not finding success, what's the truth happening here? Not, and it's hard because, like, we don't want to face the negative truths about what we're writing and what we're selling, what's working, what's not working. We definitely want to blame circumstances on the outside, right? Going
Hmm.
back to that level 5 leader thing, we definitely want to look outside of us and be like, well, it was dumb luck, or I didn't hit right, or, this thing happened that kind of threw me off of pace, or, whatever it was. But for Collins, it's like, no, you got to stop. And that's when you look in the mirror and you're like, how did this, you got to do that autopsy. You got to figure out, like, what's going on. And if you're just churning to the next book, a lot of times the autopsy isn't possible because you're
Yeah.
moving so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other reflections on number 3? I have no idea how long we've been talking. Any other reflections on number 3?
I do.
It's a 7
Um,
hour episode.
it's a 7 hour. I think, no, I would like to hear what's next, because I think
Okay.
that I can see the trajectory.
The next one is what this is the hardest to do. I think
Hmm.
confronting the brutal facts is hard. This is the
Hmm.
hardest to do. Colin says great companies develop a hedgehog concept. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole reason it's called a hedgehog concept, but the idea is that, like, there's a big myth he tells at the front of the chapter about, like, hey, the fox has 1,000 ways to escape a trap, but foxes are often trapped
Hmm.
because they're very clever and they're always trying different things, but those things don't necessarily always work. The hedgehog does one thing: when in danger, roll into a ball. And it works great. And he's like,
Yeah.
so the hedgehog knows what works and does that thing. So he's like, as you form your business or quote unquote your brand, there's three circles that collide. There's three concentric circles, and you should only do the things that fall in all three of these.
Mm-hmm.
The first circle is, what can you be the best in the world at? And he's like, you can't be the best in the world at everything.
Mm-hmm.
What can you be the best in the world at? And he pushes that like best in the world. He's like, it's not hyperbolic. What can you do better than everybody else in the world can do? The second thing is, what are you deeply passionate about? What drives your personal engine? What's going to keep you motivated to keep working and keep going? The third thing is, what drives your economic engine? What's making you money? And
Mm-hmm.
he says, those three circles, you have to do the things that are inside those circles. That's the key, is that you do
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on the hedgehog concept?
No, I'm just kidding.
You do have that in each. Well, I mean, it's hard because it's like this flies against the idea that there is an established system you can just adopt and run with, right? Because, okay, well, this genre is succeeding, so I'm just going to write a bunch of books in that genre and make a ton of money.
Right, right.
Those people, and I know I'm speaking anecdotally, I don't have evidence, but anecdotally, I've seen those people almost always burn out.
Yeah.
They do make a pot of money, but then they burn out because that wasn't what they were passionate about. And it's not actually what they could be the best in the world at. They were just throwing what was common
Yeah.
at the market. And then there's no like, they don't really ever figure out what fuels their economic engine. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
they try it for a while and then they burn out because either it's not their passion or it's not what they can be the best at, and it kind of fades.
Yeah.
But there is a period where they have that initial launch. It's not the flat line to breakthrough. It's an initial launch. And then that period of the initial launch is what we all celebrate and get excited about. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
ever stick around to see if it lasts or if it fades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like this. I have answers for all of these.
Nice.
It's
I
all
find these incredibly
pretty
difficult to answer.
clear to me.
These are very
I mean,
hard.
at the
Yeah.
moment, and I think that this is something that has to get revisited over and over again. But I think that
Yes.
if I were to look at this at the moment, I have some very clear answers, and luckily it's like what 80% of what I am doing is.
Nice.
Um, and that I just maybe need more refining at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's coming from a place of like assurance. I can clearly see things that don't fit in this circle that I internally am like, I refuse. Like, I'm not going to drop that, but I know I need to.
I can answer these incredibly clearly for the dialogue doctor.
Mm,
I've never
I
been
can
able
answer
to
it.
answer them for my fiction. And
Okay.
that's where I fight. I've never been able to figure these out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me right now, of the three things, well, four things, because story hypothesis, but at the moment, like Mandrake Manor was one of my favorite things to have done. It was my own thing to have done.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see where the passion and like all of these things, because I've gotten feedback from specific people, and like I knew it did pretty well in Vela as well. So like I can see pieces of this, and I'm continuing this with a different series, but it has the same heart to it. And we'll just see where that one goes. But that's kind of where I'm filling in the blanks from that.
Nice. Yeah, for dialogue doctor, I know that I am passionate about helping people. I
Yeah.
talk about it all the time. That's what I
Yeah.
do. That's what I do best. Helping writers is what I'm passionate about. And if I'm doing something that isn't helping writers, it feels like I'm out of my own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And then for
Mm-hmm.
like what I'm the best in the world at, and like what we as the dialogue doctor are the best in the world at, is creating tools for writers to use. We're the
Mm-hmm.
best in the world at creating tools that like craft driven tools that provide solutions for writers. Everything we've done that's successful, from like the Dialogue Daisy to Vea to Laura's like take on the 5 different types of editing, the story hypothesis, which you did and then I attempted to absorb. all of those things. Shh,
You
don't tell JP.
successfully absorbed.
Don't tell JP. All of
It's
those things
fine.
are tools that like help writers do their craft better. That's where we're the
Yeah.
best in the world. And I would say, and I will say with humility and like honesty, I do think we're the best in the world at it. I don't think anybody's as good as creating craft tools as we are. And then what drives our economic engine is teaching. Coaching and teaching is
Hmm.
what drives our
Hmm.
economic. So there's been times where we've tried things outside of our hedgehog concept and they exhaust us and they don't work. And
Hmm.
so for the last 2 years, I don't think we've tried anything out of the hedgehog concept because I've been like pretty intense on like it has to fall in these three things. Yeah. But I can't do it for my fiction. And I think, you know, I've talked to other authors about their branding and what works for them, especially for those of us who kind of like came through the Kindle gold rush. And the question they always end up asking is like, is the Write Fast Publish Repeat what I'm the best in the world at? Is it my passion or is it what was driving my economic engine? Which
Hmm.
thing was it? And like,
Yeah.
or a genre? Because like a lot of writers like, oh, you have to stay in genre because
Yep.
that works. Yeah, for some people's hedgehog concept, genre is in one of these three circles. It may be
Yep.
that they're incredibly passionate about romance. It may be that they're the best in the world at romance. Or it may be that romance is what drives their economic engine.
Yeah.
But it is important to note, like when we're studying other authors, like what is it? Where does that fall? Right? Like,
Hmm.
so when I like, Stephen King has written a lot about his career and on writing, and he's talked a lot about it. My bet is he's the best in the world at horror. Was from the beginning. He created the genre. He's the best in the world at writing horror. I think he's passionate about writing stories that thrill people. Because there's times that
Hmm.
he drifts away from horror, but all of his stories thrill people. I think he's passionate
Hmm.
about that. I think he knows what drives his economic engine is putting out a very specific kind of story.
Yeah.
And so he just drives this concept, right? Like I was going through Barnes and Noble today and I got to the Stephen King section and I was like, yep, they're all in that hedgehog concept. Everything on that shelf. Even though there's like some different genres up there, even though there's some different, they are all Stephen King books without question. And like it's that kind of like I think the really great authors that find the kind of like breakout success that we'd all love to have, they know what they do and they do it.
Hmm.
Like you and I were both at a conference where Stephanie Bond spoke.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell
That's
you what these three are for her, but I promise she knows them. Like,
yeah.
and she's
Yeah.
because she does what she does, and she's the best in the world at it. And she just,
Yeah.
I still follow her. We saw her at a conference 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I still follow all of her work, and she's
Yeah.
like, she's still doing it. She's just cranking it out, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, she's incredibly a breakout success at this because she knows what she does and she just does it well. Yeah. Anyway.
And it's like she knows how to write captivating bits of story and have a thorough follow through, because what she
Hmm.
does is serialized daily fiction that gets formed into a book. And
Yep.
in order to do that, you one have to have very captivating small snippets, but you have to know where the story is going 6 months
Hmm.
down the road
Yeah.
when you're writing the end,
And she writes a whole
and not
she
go
writes a
back.
year. Yeah. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Um anyway, but for my fiction, this is I've really struggled with the what am I the best in the world at. And I think for the first
Hmm.
6 to 7 years of writing fiction, I had such a low opinion of myself that I couldn't even ask that question. Like, what are you the best in the world at? I'm garbage at everything. Right? Like I couldn't even tell you. And I still can't answer it. I'm coming around to it. But I can't quite tell you. I can't quite put my finger on what I'm
Crafting
passionate about.
strong characters with clear defined voices of all types.
That's right. Crazy casts.
Well, no,
Um,
if you think about it, like that's what Nerds is, right?
yeah,
Like
it's just a bunch of
it's a big
voices.
cast of
Yeah.
multiple voices that are intentionally distinct for a reason.
And I will say I did try to write a series of books. My Mo books were supposed to be just about Mo. And I think I got halfway through book one and now she has a team. Like it's like this is
Right.
just like
So
what I
you
write.
went against the grain.
And but my internal compass immediately pulled me back. Um,
Hmm.
and I haven't figured out yet what drives an economic engine for me because I haven't necessarily had I don't know. Anyway, this isn't about analyzing my
Oh, okay.
problems. Yeah.
Are you
This
sure?
isn't Jeff's therapy session. But this
Fine.
is what I'm asking about this book. And I do think that my inability to define this is what holds me back from breakout success. Is that like I don't know how to answer these, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Anyway.
like my answers are still unsure. They're unclear, but I'm hopeful because I'm a hopeful person.
Yeah, well, it is that disciplined thinking though. So like you were saying earlier, this isn't a like you find it and then it's like, oh, now I'm good to go.
Hmm.
It has to be paired with that confronting the brutal facts.
Hmm.
So there's a constant in disciplined thinking. There's a constant like, this is who I think I am and what I think I have to be doing. Here are the brutal facts about it. And
Yeah.
you're in this stage of trying never to adjust your circles and always stay in your circles, but also being very honest about your circles, right? Like
Hmm.
in what's yeah. Um,
Yeah.
okay. Any other thoughts on the hedgehog concept?
No.
Okay. I will say in leadership circles, this one gets the most pushback
Yeah. I
because
could see this.
in like leadership culture in company culture specifically, it's like, no, we have to try a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
And Collins is like good companies that have like peaks and then slowly kind of fade. They try a whole bunch of different things and they finally
Yeah.
find they like throw everything at the wall and they finally find something that sticks. If you want to be a great company, if you want to be like a breakout success that sustains for a career, you have to know who you are and what you're
I mean, it's the argument of quality versus quantity, right? And it's the trying to hit and do everything you can is quantity.
doing. Yeah.
But if you're capable of creating something that is quality by definition of what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and what works,
Yeah.
then you have created something that you can carry people on over through the rest of your work, as opposed to creating a high quantity, throwing a bunch of ads up there,
Yeah.
and it's middle road stuff. It's stuff that basically reflects or mimics other writing of the same because it's a churn of the same story and
Yeah.
all that.
And he would say if what you're the best in the world at is creating high quantity
Right.
and like that, you can align your passion and align your economic engine with that. He's like, do it, do that, just crank. If
All
that's
right.
what you're the best. And I would argue that, like, I mean, I don't know these guys and I followed them when I was a young writer, but the people who know them or they themselves might be like, that's not true. I might say that like Johnny, Sean, and Dave pair, who were like Write Fast, Publish,
Hmm.
Repeat, what they were the best in the world at was Write Fast, Publish, Repeat. That they are.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody, even Michael Anderle. I've never seen anybody do it like they did it. They were the best in the world at it.
Is that something that's still viable today, though?
I don't know, and part of me is like,
Yeah.
maybe for them, if they're not doing it anymore, maybe for
Right.
them, if they were still doing it, it would be like
Right.
because it is about like what this is. Part of what doing the hedgehog concept does is you find your market and then you just do this over and over and over again.
Right. You
And
serve that market.
yeah, because it's your passion, it's sustainable long term.
Yeah.
Because you're the best in the world at it, they get attracted to it. And if it's and fueling your economic engine gives you the freedom to keep driving. Does that make sense?
Okay. No, it does. It does because I think I still think there's a difference between high quantity of things that you're passionate about versus
Yeah.
high quantity of things that you're just trying to get an economic surge
Yeah,
for.
and that's what I was trying to clarify is like you're
Yeah.
like a high quantity of ideas and like the idea fairy having like every new idea and throwing everything against the wall versus like
Yeah.
finding the one idea that works and driving with it.
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
think you're right in that. I just didn't want to confuse it about like high quantity of producing books. It's like no,
Yeah.
once you
Yeah.
find the right idea,
No, 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 no.
produce as many of those books as you can. Like just go. And then,
Agreed.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Agreed.
yeah. Anyway, okay, let's do the next one. I don't have
Okay.
this one, so I'm not gonna. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen anyway. Okay, so
Yeah.
the next one is you did see the 3 concentric circles, right? I did share that at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, go
You
by the book. You
did.
can find it. Okay,
You did.
number 5 is the culture of discipline, and so this is where we're moving into disciplined action. So
Hmm.
discipline thought to different discipline action, and this is where you actually start to see results because
Yeah.
Collins will be like, look, getting the right yourself set and your network set, and then getting disciplined thought, learning to think disciplinedly and like to analyze what's happening around you and to like know yourself and your business in a deep way. That you don't see results. He's like,
Hmm.
the results start to come at the disciplined action. He's like, disciplined action balances freedom and responsibility.
Hmm.
There is the freedom to try new things and to think about new things, but the responsibility to stay doggedly disciplined in your hedgehog concept. So
Yeah.
you are allowed to try all the new things you want in the center of those concentric circles,
Yeah.
but you're not allowed to leave the center of those concentric circles. You can do like you can play around in there and be open to all kinds of new ideas, but you're not allowed to get out of that. So it's that balance of like restriction and freedom at the same time. You will go to extreme lengths to fulfill your responsibilities. So the culture
Hmm.
of discipline is like, we will do what has to be done. There is no stopping what we'll do. And then you're not tyrannical. So tyrannical is the idea that you're like, demanding that these things happen. You're not tyrannical. You're still keeping that, humility and disciplined will, and you're working with your network to like, maintain things, but you're not an asshole. Like I kind of think of his part 3 as like, don't be an asshole. And then 4 is, and it's funny because it's in 1, and then he just brings it back to 4. You have to
Hmm.
stay adhered to the hedgehog concept.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, you have to, that's number 4 about a disciplined culture. A disciplined culture has the freedom to like try new things, but also has the obsession with this is who we are and this is what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thoughts on disciplined culture?
This is what we were just talking about. This
Yeah.
is the churn that has precision.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas in like author journey, I think before this, you try a few things, you make prototypes basically. That's what you're writing to make prototypes. You're figuring out what is your voice, what is who you are as a person. It takes a ton of time. And then ultimately you get to a stage where you figure out what this hedgehog concept is, which could change in the future. But at the
Mm-hmm.
moment, it doesn't. And you churn there.
Yeah.
Now
And
that you see it, you churn.
that's kind of the idea between freedom and responsibility is that like you have the freedom to talk about it all the time. You have the responsibility to maintain it. So to change something in it, to tweak it a little bit, needs to be really painful and like
Yeah.
hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 6, because we've already talked about that one. You've unless you have more
Mhm.
to say about it, I feel like we're good.
I think
Culture
in terms
discipline.
of like dialogue doctor community, with looking at the schedule for next year, we're in the trial phase of Hedgehog, I would maybe say.
I know our hedgehog. I think we're in the trial phases of application.
Okay, that's where I felt like it was.
Yeah.
I just
We have the
misworded it. Yeah.
freedom to do new things. Like Laura and I were like I know our hedgehog, and people were like, can we do a conference? This is a good example of how you like,
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
feel like we did well with the freedom and the responsibility. People were like, can we have a conference? And I was immediately like, not in our hedgehog, right?
Yeah.
The thing we do best in the world is we create tools. The thing I'm really passionate about is about helping people. What drives our economic engine is coaching and teaching. And I was like,
Yeah.
nope, conference is not in our hedgehog. And so I didn't say that out loud, but that's what I was thinking. And then Laura was talking to me and she's like, hey, because I have the right people in the seats. And Laura's like, hey, we can do all those things in a conference.
Yeah.
It's not the conference where we invite a bunch of outside people to come and speak. It's a conference where we pull people together to do intensified coaching. I was like, all right, we'll have the freedom. You have proven to me that it's inside our hedgehog concept. I will admit that I'm wrong. Let's have the freedom to do it. We did it and it
Hmm.
was amazing. It was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of those things. Then we did an autopsy and it's like, this was great. Everybody that came loved it. They were all very passionate about it. They all said it helped them. We got great feedback. Is this something that we should do every year? Does this become part of our offering? And when we did the autopsy, we realized that like the time and commitment to build something that could grow, we don't have yet.
Yeah.
And we don't
Exactly.
have the audience, the size of an audience yet to do this every year. This was great. We don't have the size of the audience to do it every year. So we had to confront the brutal facts of like, this is a once every 3 year thing.
Yeah.
We'll
For
do it
now.
again. It falls in our hedgehog concept. It's fantastic. We loved it. We don't have, after doing the autopsy, it was like, we don't have the capacity to do this every single year. So for right now, this is a once in a 3 year thing. And we'll
Yeah.
bring it back. We might grow. And like you're saying, like things change. We might grow. We might reevaluate. We might like our, you know, community might grow. And we might have
Yep.
enough people that are like, yeah, we could do this every year and new people would come and be great. We might, I like maybe I go full time at some point with the dialogue doctor. We're nowhere near that happening, but maybe that happens at some point. Then we would have more capacity to pull this off,
Yeah.
right? Like, so there is the like there, but is that like confronting the brutal facts? So like coming into planning a year, we're offering things up to what we plan, and as the leader, I'm constantly with the hedgehog concept in my head, being like, how is what we're saying match
Yep.
what we're talking about? And so we are trying new stuff. We're doing these mini masterminds, which are new, 100% within our hedgehog concept, right? Like
Yeah.
we did the dialogue dash. We've been doing kind of an ongoing autopsy as it goes on. And it's like, no, this is a great tool. It's what we're the
Hmm.
best in the world at. It's a great tool. We're passionate because it builds this community and we're helping authors. People are finding help. And it's coaching. So it drives our economic engine. We've been able to like do mass coaching through this. So like, yeah, we're doing
Yeah.
this again. Like, it's that kind of like that understanding who we are so that we can decide what we do and what we don't do, right? Like online courses is something that I tried this year because I was like, I like helping authors, I like creating tools, and coaching drives my engine. I did online courses, or we did online courses. It was like, oh, this isn't something we need to emphasize because it's not coaching.
Hmm.
It's teaching, it's not coaching. Coaching drives our engine, teaching
Yep.
does not. And so there's that like where like, and we do a lot of teaching, but it's that like this isn't necessarily driving that economic engine, so it's taking a back seat and we're not pushing
Yep.
that forward. Yeah, so anyway, that's just how like I think we do it successfully, to give people an example of how you use a hedgehog concept to analyze what's happening and what's not happening, and then have the freedom though to have people in your community and your network be like, no, 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 this will work, and we can expand what we're doing, we can like rethink what we're doing in that way. uh yeah, anything else we want to say about discipline culture? And
No.
okay, this one's going to make people mad. Technology accelerators.
Ooh.
Collins believes it is a huge mistake to jump onto new technology without knowing how to use it. He's like, it's a waste of time and it's a distraction and it throws you out of whack.
Hmm.
He says you can only use new technology when you know how it's going to empower your hedgehog concept. So you're only allowed to accelerate what you're doing with tech. When technology is used to empower the culture of discipline that you have, it's an accelerator. If you apply technology because it's new and fancy, it's a massive distraction and will actually throw you off whack. And he says you can't ignore technology. New
Hmm.
technology has to be adapted, but you cannot automatically start using it. You have to know yourself well enough to say, this is how this will help me before you start jumping into it. Thoughts?
I'm extremely skeptical on this one.
Again, I was hoping we get one.
Uh, Here's my pushback. I think that in general, that's a great stance for some people. But when I look at one, then who's going to use the technology when it first comes out? You know, like someone has to use it. Someone
Yeah.
has to apply it. Otherwise, no one will know how to use the technology. So I think that there is a collection of people who this doesn't apply for. I think people with high input, high intellection, and high ideation, those are
Yeah.
my top three.
Nice.
Uh, they're the people that they are capable of looking at newer technology and seeing and brainstorming with it, but not letting it necessarily hinder. Now, it's something that you have to hone in on. It's not something that I'm always great at, but
Hmm.
I really love looking at new technology and conceptualizing what it could look like in the future, um, and being able to play with it and apply it. I think that all to say, maybe like 85% of the population, this is great. But I think that there is a small group that it is not.
There is a little bit of Machiavelli here in Collins, in which he's like, let other people experiment and fail, watch them, learn how they use it, and then apply it. After he's like, don't be first, be second. That's his like,
But of those like first few people, there's going to be those people with the
there's
high
there's gonna be a
that
couple
succeed.
breakouts, but
Exactly.
he's like, there's gonna be a couple breakouts, but you have to stay true to your hedgehog
Yeah,
concept.
yeah.
So let them play with it and then decide how to apply it. And I'm with you. I don't know, in a company format, this is where I struggle. Is I don't know how to apply this to author life necessarily.
R&D.
Yeah, in a company
You,
format, he's like, you take a section of people, you put them in
yeah.
R&D. You're like, you guys go play with all the shit you want to play with, right?
Hmm.
Like, go do your thing, inform us how it works. It does not become a part of the company. We do not turn what we're doing. We do
Yep.
not like add to what we're doing until R&D understands it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we can decide whether or not it matches the hedgehog concept. With in author life, R&D is also me.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. Like with
Well,
fiction, like I am also R&D. So I don't know like how to like separate that necessarily. If I was super disciplined with my time, I could be like, okay, 20% of my time goes to R&D, 80% of my time goes to producing work.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where if you don't have that discipline, you are not this person. But
Yeah.
if you have if you have that need for brainstorming and you have the ability to set a timer and actually stick to it, then you give yourself time to R&D something. Let's just use AI because that's the elephant in the room of
Mhm.
concepts of what's new technology. You give yourself a certain amount of time, play with it, use it, but don't play with it in the way that a lot of people play with it negatively, in the sense of like, look, it can't write because I gave it this crappy prompt and it gave me this
Yeah.
terrible response. Like, dig into it, figure out how it can function, answer some questions, but then when the timer goes off, you leave that and you never use it for your current projects until you understand what the system can do. And then, of course, because there's like all this other talk around it, until you understand that as well.
Yeah. And this is where I think this gets really hard. Like, just to kind of take a step back, is that, when you're starting something, when you're starting your own business or starting your own author journey, or we all have day jobs,
Hmm.
we all have families, we all have lives. So the time in which you are disciplined and planning and the emotional energy that you have is limited.
Yeah.
And so to be like, in order to succeed, you have to be disciplined with the people around you, disciplined with your thinking, and disciplined with your action. It's asking a lot. And in
Hmm.
in that discipline, producing a product, it's
Hmm.
asking a lot. And so it can be, I think, you know, this is why many of us never become great, because
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot.
I mean, I would say if you are new to this and you don't have the time, R&D is the first thing to go. Writing has
Yeah.
a tried and true method.
Yeah.
You have a word processor or a sheet of paper in front of you and you write, period.
Yeah.
There's no other frills around it. All the other frills is R&D. It's things you need to learn,
Yeah.
period. And so if you don't have the time and space for that, then you do the word processor. You do the actual writing
Yeah.
and you worry about the rest of the stuff later.
And you may find that, like, as you engage in new technology, like with AI, you may find that you are the best in the world at writing a novel with ChatGPT.
Hmm.
Then that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't,
Right.
don't go and like get out a yellow pad and a pen and start writing again. Like, that's not, if you're the best in the world at that thing, do that thing, right? Like, don't,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
After making sure that it's all good and dandy with whatever
yeah, yeah.
it's outside of it, but yeah.
Um, okay, so part 7 goes back to the full picture. Now that we
Hmm.
understand the full picture, understand all the pieces of it, the ideas of the flywheel, that
Hmm.
like, and a flywheel is a wheel you turn that's hard to turn at first, but the more it turns, the faster it goes.
Hmm.
So the idea is that you just keep doing this over and over again. You keep being disciplined people with disciplined thought and disciplined action. And that's where breakthrough comes, by spinning that flywheel. And he talks about, interestingly, in turning the flywheel, he talks about when you talk to these great companies, when he goes and talks to the leaders of these great companies, he's like, what was the moment you knew you had breakthrough? And they're like, well, there was 1,000 tiny moments. There's not one, there's 1,000 tiny revolutions of the flywheel. And they're like, and the more it spins, the faster they come. And that's, when I talk to authors that have success, I'm like, what's your breakout book? They'll be like, well, this book was a breakout in this way. This book was a breakout in this way. This
Hmm.
book was actually my personal breakout book, where I like came to understand who I am. And like, they can tell you like, oh, these things happened along the way, and there's 1,000 tiny breakouts. And
Yeah.
that's why it becomes a sustainable climb as opposed to a peak that then fizzles out, is
Yeah.
because you're turning that flywheel and you're getting routine breakthroughs the more you stay disciplined in your thinking and action.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, looking at it at this viewpoint and thinking about it in terms of author career, what this is really suggesting is for internal discipline to find the people that uh, are at the same level as you, who have the same drive as you to help move you forward, um, to basically figure out what your quote unquote brand is at the time, always be learning, um, and then do the churn, focus.
Yeah.
It's almost like the stage of like you are gathering all of these people and this support and all of this understanding of self, and then you are expunging as much as you can out of that before returning back into this like
Yeah.
absorption stage.
And I think part of it too is that, like, just to add I totally agree. And to add to it, part of what Collins is saying is that when it comes to the hedgehog concept, it has to be true to you.
Hmm.
It can't just be true to the market. It has to be
Hmm.
true to you and who you are and what you love and what you're the best in the world at. And then with the team, I do want to add, because we didn't talk about this, but I do want to add, like, who's the right seats on the bus. That also counts, like the cover designer you use, the
Yeah.
editors you use, the coaches that you engage with. They have to, like, I can't let my first my third book, I kept being told, you need to hire a professional editor, you need to hire a professional editor. So I hired a professional editor. She made it worse. Like, yeah, she gave me some grammar notes, but like, her notes on how to like her developmental edit notes were outside of my hedgehog concept. She did not
Mhm.
understand who I was or what I was trying to write.
Mhm.
And, you know, thankfully back then I was smart enough to be like, she's in the wrong seat on the bus. This is not the
Yeah.
person I need
Yeah.
to do this. I did not pay her again. So like, it's that kind of like, she's a wonderful person and she was very nice to talk to, but she was not the right person in my bus. I had to get her off. Or like I did an early cover designer I used that gave me some covers I actually never put on anything. They clearly didn't understand what I was trying to do. And they were not, even though they came highly recommended and I had paid them, they were not the right people for the bus. And so
Mhm.
it's like, you're not part of my team. Like this isn't,
Yeah.
and it's not personal. It's just, we're not in the same place. Like they took too long to get me the stuff. They like, you know, it was too much of a hassle. I had to keep explaining things. It's like, this isn't good. My cover designer now, she's amazing. And she
Mhm.
is my team. As long as I don't screw with her work, she's really good. She's really good. When I'm not like, no, put live people on the cover. When I don't do that and I actually listen to her, she's really great. Um, anyway, just to add those
I
couple
think
things.
And I think too, when you're talking about like that team of making the work that you made better in all
Mhm.
facets of itself, you have some aspects of that, like cover design, that you may never wish to learn. So you're going to get the best that you can get at the time that can best represent what you want the work to represent.
Yeah.
When we're talking about editors, I think you should always be learning from that editor, especially when it comes to developmental editing and copy editing. Maybe when it comes down to like proofreading, if you're just like, grammar is a mystery to me and that's whatever, that's fine. But
I find it
I think
addicting.
that I think that when it comes down to like development and copy, like you should always be learning, and there should be a almost, you are hiring them until you no longer need them.
Yeah.
And that should always be the concept, because you should always consider the point in which you have learned everything you could from them. And now, in order to make your work better, there's another person to find.
I tell everybody I coach, my goal is to do just enough sessions that you don't need me anymore.
Yeah,
And then
that's what I want that too.
yeah. Um, okay. Any final reflections on Jim Collins is Good to Great?
You know, your conversation, I'm not going to say this book, but your conversation about this book made me hate this idea less.
Good. Thanks. Yay.
Yay.
I don't read it, JP. You'll hate the book. Oh,
Perfect.
yeah.
I'm so glad I got the cliff notes.
If you enjoy leadership books and you really want to think about how leadership works, this is I would say a leadership Bible.
Yeah.
But if you don't enjoy reading very technical at times discussions of how companies work, don't read this book. But I think the concepts are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was excited that we got to do this as our first JP joint book together. Yeah.
Joints with JP.
Joins with JP. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording and we can talk some more.